for the following wonderful people. Esther Sarah Bas Chai Pesel, Dov Mordechai Ben Bey, Lasheva Elisheva Shena Bas Adina, Edel Adar Sarah Bas Basileia, Liora Galia Bas Sarah, Fegolea Bas Chana, Arya Yaakov Ben Rus Tzipoira, Inichil Mir Ben Bella, they shall be Zechtur for Shlema. As well for the following beautiful Neshama people, Yeshua Bekara for Shalom Schana, Leah Bas Racha, Shalom Ben Malka Roiza, Gelchana Bas Fegolea. And of course, as a schus, as an Eli Neshama for Yitzchak Moshe Ben Yeshua HaKoyen. By the way, that's my father-in-law. Daniel Arya Ben Yitzchak Moshe HaKoyen, my brother-in-law. He passed away by COVID. By COVID?
Are you serious? Your brother-in-law?
My wife's sister.
Your wife's sister passed away?
My wife's brother. Yeah. He was in a home. He was he had unfortunate complications.
Like in April at the beginning?
Right before Pesach. I went to his Levaya.
I went to my cousin's Levaya on
3 days before Pesach.
My uncle and my cousin died 4 days apart.
Oh, terrible.
My aunt lost a husband and a son.
That's terrible.
Yep.
Also for Tzvi Avigdor ben Aaron Elazar. That's who William is named after. And my son as well. And Eva Shlomit Baschem.
Yep.
Okay. Let's Hashem these lists.
Oh, yesterday, Ryan had worked out for him in court.
Good. Hopefully we had it. I'd love to know that we took a little part. We took a little.
Said it was an ace. They called the sister, whatever, on the phone. She broke down. Said the lawyer threatened her with the whole profession worked out.
Good. Can I know her?
Yep.
He should be zeicher the continued Yeshuas. Okay. Today's daf is daf Yevamos daf Chavtes. And Chavtes is
the Mishnah we're up to.
Mishnah on Chavtes Amud Beis in the bottom, about 8 lines or so from the bottom of the Gemara.
2 Mishnahs closely.
So we're going to have. It's actually going to be today's 2 Mishnahs, and then tomorrow we have one of those rat-a-tat-tat days of 3 or 4 Mishnahs on the same dot. Okay, and they're all going to be similar to the first Mishnah in the sense that many brothers married to some sisters. We're going to be discussing Achos Kukaso and stuff like that. It says the Mishnah Vayter. Shlosha Achid, you have 3 brothers. Yeah. Shnayim mehen nesua shtei achias. So this is very similar to what we've seen so far. You have Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Let's say Reuven and Shimon are married to Rachel and Leah. I'll try to keep the ratios together. So that's how I think of it. I don't know why, for some reason, it helps me to say that Reuven is always married to Rachel, right? So that way, in case we don't have it up on the board. Oh, Isha Ubita. Oh, Isha Ubas Bita. Oh, Isha Ubas Bino. We actually saw this Mishnah quoted earlier in the Masechta. On Daf Yomi. And at first there was actually, if you remember, that was a big machlek Zabaya and Rava. I think we did that Gemara on a Shabbos, or maybe on a Sunday, where the question was, are these to be read as all one case, where you have 2 brothers married to 4 women each? That's how Rava learned. But the simple learning was these were not and cases, these were or cases. So each one of these is its own case. So it's 3 brothers, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Reuven, Shimon married to Rachel and Leah, and the relationship that exists between Rachel and Leah is a relationship that it would be impossible for any one of these brothers to be married to both of them, either because they're sisters, or because they're a mother and a daughter, or a grandmother and a granddaughter. So says the Mishnah, what do you do in such a case, where 2 Reuven and Shimon die, right? This halacha is very simple. This is really no different than the Mishnah that we saw in the beginning of the parak. That when you have 2 Yevamim, because you have 1 Yavam, let's say Levi, what is he supposed to do? He's got 2 women falling to him. So these 2 women are Achos Kukaso. Each one of them is a Skuka to him. So the Chiddush of this Mishnah is really the Chiddush of the Mishnah of Achos Kukaso, but not just Achos Kukaso. We've always discussed Achos Kukaso because it's the easiest case to discuss, where 2 brothers are married to 2 sisters. But theoretically speaking, 2 brothers can be married to a mother and a daughter. One can be married to a granddaughter and a grandmother, whatever it is. But the point is that your krovas kukaso, the relative of the woman that you're zakuka to, because the zika is like a marriage, it's like a krova of a marriage. So no different than you're not allowed to be with your
erva, right?
It's an erva.
Yeah.
So too krovas kukaso was like a derabanan of an erva. It's a very similar concept to achos kukaso, same idea. That's the opinion of the chachamim. And again, it's cholzos. You do chalitza and not yibum. Why? Because since it's only midirabanan. It's only midirabanan that you're not allowed to be with achos kukaso. On a Torah level, there is still a zika to both ladies. They don't get to go free. The Torah says they have a zika. They need a chalitza. Otherwise, they're going to be an aguna. So you got to give them a chalitza. And you can't do yibam because midirabanan, it's also to be with them. Okay. That's the shita of the chachamim. Very nice. What about Reb Shimon? Reb Shimon, we've seen earlier, also, I think on Daf Yates or Daf Chav, Reb Shimon Poiter. Reb Shimon says no. When you have two women who are falling to you in Yibum, and that if in theory you were to do Yibum to both, you would now have two women who are tsaros to each other that are ervas to each other, meaning, right? So it says Reb Shimon, even though it's only Asr Midirabanan to be with each one of these people, he says there's nothing to do with that. He says the reason why there's a problem here is because when you have two women falling from two separate houses, and both of those houses have a Chi of Yibum or a Chi of Chalitza, but if you should theoretically speaking marry the two of them, you would have an Isser Erva, right? Let's say you marry both Rachel and Leah, you're now married to sisters. You can't be married to sisters. Mamish and Erva, he says in such a situation, that's almost like having an Erva fall to you. You understand? Meaning normally we say an Erva paters when she's an Erva before she ever falls, like she's already your sister married to someone, right? But what happens if you have a regular woman who you're allowed to be with and another regular woman you're allowed to be with? It's just that they have an external connection that makes you now problematic with the two of them for that reason. So it says Reb Shimon, and he has a Xeris Akasav, we'll see it in the Gemara, first thing we saw it earlier as well, that he learns from the word litzrar to extend the tzara, not just to when two women are falling to you, one's an Erva and the other one's a tzara, but even when two separate women from two separate homes are falling to you, and it creates Erva when they fall, says Reb Shimon, they're pater. Okay, so what does that mean in this case? Reb Shimon says you don't even need to do chalitza. Now, what then would these two women be? These would be Ervas. Meaning, my Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Reuven and Shimon have Rachel and Leah as wives. Reuven and Shimon then die. Now, these two ladies fall to Yibam according to the Tanakama. According to Reb Shimon, they don't fall to Yibam. They're like an Erva, right? Meaning, in that sense, what are they? They're an Eshes Ach without a mitzvah.
Yeah,
So they're an Erva.
They can marry anybody else.
Not just that, but I'm saying to him, he's an Erva. Saying, according to the Chachamim, it's tremendous Chiddush. I mean, the Pasuk of Litzor says that even though to you these women are not an erva, independently, meaning let's say you were to no, this I'm not 100% sure, but so I'll pause on that. The point is that according to Reb Shimon, we treat these women like an erva even though they're not an erva to you, and therefore the kedushin doesn't take there's no din yibum, and therefore they completely go free, and they're an erva. There's a chi of kares. We're working now within Reb Shimon. That the Gemara is going to explain. This is very similar to what we saw earlier. Let's say in this scenario, Rachel or Leah, right, were asura olav iser erva. So besides them being sisters to each other, one of them is, let's say, an erva to you. So let's say your daughter married, Levi's daughter married Ruvain. Rachel is his daughter, and then his other brother Shimon married Leah, her sister. Right? Meaning from, let's say, the mother, not from you. Yeah. So they're sisters where only one of them is an erva and the other one's not an erva to you. Now, all of a sudden, Reb Shimon agrees that an erva doesn't have a din yibum. So now Rachel doesn't have a zika. Well, if Rachel doesn't have a zika, now even Reb Shimon's going to agree that over here you can do, what does it say? Asr ba umutter ba'chosa. The one who's got an erva, obviously you can't do yibum or chalitza with her. There's no reason to. She's pater from yibum and chalitza. But the other one is going to be chayev, and not only chayev, but you can even do yibum, because what would be the problem? What would be the isser in being with her? She's the sister, doesn't matter. The other woman isn't falling to you, so she's no longer achas kukaso. We no longer have a problem of litzra saying that two women falling pater each other, because the second one's not falling. She's an erva to begin with. So therefore, says Reb Shimon, Allah is going to be, you could do yibum with the other one. Last line in the Mishnah. Isser mitzvah, isser kiddush, which is, again, you're going to find this whenever you find the other one. When the relationship that exists between Reuven and Rachel, between Levi and Rachel, is not an erva relationship, but only a derabanan or a lav that's not a kares, where the zika is still there, then really it's the same thing as having no isser, and there's a zika in both, and this fits Reb Shimon's model that you have two women falling, that if you should do yibum to both, you'd end up being married to sisters. And so therefore says Reb Shimon that in this situation, halacha is cholzos u'lemis yavamos. We don't allow you to do a yibum. So rather, it's chalitza. It's a very interesting thing over here. Let's just review. I'm going to draw it because I think it's helpful to see it.
How does he makes a feel between one case and the other case?
Yeah, so let's see it. It's easier to explain it when we have a visual. So let's take a look here. Just going to make sure I have it right up here. Okay. We're going to call this diagram 1. I'm going to reference it through the Gemara. You have Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Reuven is married to Rachel, and Shimon is married to Leah. Okay, And we're saying that
They're
they're
sisters.
sisters.
Oh.
And what we're saying is, let's say, so let's work like this. The Chachamim said, very simple case.
So that's-
If they're sisters, right? So then obviously each one of these are achas kukasai, and if each one of these are achas kukasai, then Levi has to do chalitza with them, can't do yibum. That's the Chacham. Says Reb Shimon, since these women are sisters and they're both independently falling to Levi, then they both have a zika. Says Reb Shimon, the pasuk of Litzra, we'll see it in the Gemara, tells me if I would do yibum to both, I'd be married to sisters. That means they don't fall. Meaning, if they would become tsaros, that would be ushered for me because their sisters were a mother and a daughter or one of those types of things, he holds there's no zika at all. And therefore, Rachel and Leah, not only can't do yibum with them, they're an erva. They're it would be if Levi would do yibum with Rachel or Leah, he'd be illegally sleeping with his brother's wife. This is an erva relationship. Because again, it's no different than if, like, let's say Rachel had children, and there's no mitzvah yibum. Who is she? She's my brother's wife. I can't be with her. Well, so too, according to Reb Shimon, when they're sisters both falling from two separate houses, that's like the equivalent of them both having kids. They're just a regular Eshesach, Shalom and Mocha Mitzvah. So therefore, Levi, not only is there no Yibum or Chalitza, it's also to do it. They're free to go immediately. That's Reb Shimon's opinion. Now,
It's Ein Zika. It's because it's Ein Zika, or that doesn't
no,
really matter.
Zika's a little bit of a
because we
different.
married both.
Happened. Okay, so okay, 1 second. The answer to your question is technically yes. There would be
Right.
no Zika,
Right.
but not because of Ein Zika. Ein Zika is a technical term. Here, there would be no Zika at all. There's no falling to Yibum here. When Reuven and Shimon die,
They're falling together, right? They're both
Right.
dying, what? At the
Reuben
same
should.
moment.
We're not
after each
factoring
other,
that in over
whatever.
here. Yeah, let's assume Reuben dies first. But for
Got
now,
it.
for our sake, we're going to
They
assume.
both died together
the
before he does
yeah.
even with one.
And so now he's got two ladies both falling to him. So says the Mishnah, says Reb Shimon, since if I would do Yibum to Rachel and Leah together, let's say I could theoretically speaking do that, and I would marry both of them, I'd be married to sisters, and I can't be married to sisters. That means that to begin with, there's no Zika. That's how Reb Shimon learns. And he learns it from a pasuk. It's very counter to the way we've been understanding.
Mhm.
The way we would have understood is we would have said, what do you mean? She's from Reuven's house. She's from Shimon's house. Each one of them have a Zika, so I have a responsibility to each one of them. This is the Shita of the Chachamim. So therefore, I can't do Yibum with her because she's Midrabanan, the sister of my Skuka. Same thing with her, sister of my Skuka. So therefore, I can't do Yibum. I got to do Chalitza with the both of them. That's how the Chachamim. Shimon says, no. Shimon says that
Chalitza, no
since
nothing.
if I did Yibum with both, they'd be my sister. I'd be married to sisters, and that's also.
Bad. No,
Therefore, it's nothing. Now, Rav Shimon says the following thing in the Mishnah. What happens if
Rabbanan.
this is an erva relationship? Whatever the erva is, let's say this is his daughter, meaning Levi's daughter married Shimon, and her sister from her mother, let's say, married Reuven, which is fine, nothing wrong with that. And then Reuven and Shimon die. Now, all of a sudden, who's falling?
It's an erva.
So one of them is an erva. So just like we learned in the Mishnah,
It's
if you have an erva.
Sorrow of an erva.
So according to Reb Shimon, even though he holds their tsaros when they're married to me, but this would now be a normal case. The normal case is Shimon's house has an erva, so she's not skuka to me at all. So now all of a sudden Rachel is. Because the whole reason why Rachel didn't have a zika with me before is because she and her sister were falling to me. But now her sister's not falling to me anymore. She's falling on her own. If she's falling on her own, okay, so then that's a regular normal case of
They were
Yibum.
both married to the same person last
No,
time.
last
At the
time,
beginning.
yeah. This
Got
time we're
it,
talking
got
about
it.
where they're separate people.
Got
So
it.
since Rachel's married to Reuven and Leah's married to Shimon, normally if this is not an erva, Rachel and Leah, Reb Shimon has a special chiddush. There's no zika, there's no nothing, because if I would marry both of them, they'd be married to sisters. But if one of them is an erva, then that means that there isn't even a mitzvah even to speak of by Leah, which means when Shimon dies, Reuven dies. Rachel's now falling to me in Yibum. When Shimon dies, Leah doesn't fall. So she's unaffected. So there's no effect on Rachel. Therefore, Rachel is a regular Yevama. Levi would have a mitzvah sibum. That's what it says in the Mishnah when it says, according to Reb Shimon, Asura olav iser erva, here, Asur ba muter bechosa. Yeah, okay. Then he said iser mitzvah. What if it would be instead of an erva here? Actually, you know what? I'm going to leave the erva up. And we'll put iser mitzvah on the bottom. What if it's an Isser mitzvah? So let's just work this out now. So let's say instead of Levi and Leah being his daughter, maybe it's his mother's mother or something. It's a shnia, something that's only midrabanan. I did it on purpose for you. Yeah.
I knew it.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say Leah is a shnia. That means Levi is also to be with her midrabanan. But on a Torah level, he could be with her, right? So it says the Mishnah, Isser mitzvah, oy Isser kedusha, choltzos velo misyavmos. You do chalitza with both, and you don't do Yibum. So again, so Isser Mitzvah means that Leah, and again, this is a unique,
Shimon would say Rachel's fine though, right? Still
no
not.
Yibum, holds us for both of them. He would say on a Torah level, this is what he would say, on a Torah level, right? On a Torah level, really they're both Pater.
Right.
Right? Because according to him, on a Torah level,
You do Yibum with both, right?
no, other way around. No. Remember, Rav Shimon's opinion is, here, let's cover this up. Rav Shimon's opinion is, since Rachel and Leah are both falling to me, and I have a Zika with
Or you
both of
think
them,
that's not- right,
then
right.
he has a special chiddush that they're nothing. Now all of a sudden they're an Isser Mitzvah, Leah. So that means on a Torah level, nothing's changed. Because an Isser Mitzvah is only with the Rabbanon. Min
Right.
Torah, nothing's changed. They should be Pater. But on a Rabbanon level, she is falling to me. Why? Because on the Rabbanon level, I can't be with Leah, which means on the Rabbanon level, there's a mitzvah Yibum with Rachel. I obviously can't do Yibum with Rachel, because on a Torah level, she's my Erva. So therefore, he says, do Chalitza with both. We'll see why he needs to do Chalitza with Leah. Really, he should only really need to do Chalitza with Rachel,
Only because you only need one.
because you only need one, because really over here, no. Yeah, because in Torah, there's no Yibum. There's no Zika. So Rachel's going to need a Chalitza. Really, Leah, Midrabanan, and Leah won't need anything. But he says Choltzes V'lo Misyavnos.
We're talking about the second case, right?
Yeah.
Mitzvah?
Yeah.
So that's only Midrabanan, right? Midoraisa what?
Midaraisa,
False.
it would be like nothing.
Good, like nothing, right?
Meaning, and no Yibam at all. Remember, Rav Shimon's opinion is different than the Chachamim. The Rav Shimon's opinion is that when you have two sisters falling at the same
no matter
time,
what, it's not-
no matter what,
Got it.
that
You can't marry
that there's
two
no
sisters,
Yibam, right?
right.
And since you get married, that means we hold that there's no Yibam to begin with. It's only that since there's an Isser Rabbanon, on the Rabbanon level, there would be a requirement for Chalitza. So let's read it inside. Says yes, which is a little bit of a chiddush yet. Okay, now let's talk about the following. We're going to leave Erva up, and I'm going to create a second case here. We'll call this, we'll keep it in the same one. We'll do Reuben, Shimon, and Levi. Again, same case, Rachel and Leah. And in this case, where there's no Erva relationship. So in this case, according to Reb Shimon, they're sisters. Remember, according to Reb Shimon,
They're not related to Levi.
yeah, in this case over here,
No,
according to Reb
nothing.
Shimon, they're both
Pater.
Pater. That's a special chiddush that he has. So this way we can leave it up to juxtapose the two cases. Let's say, says the Gemara like this. Tanya, there's a brayso, Reb Shimon pointed b'shtein min hachalitza min hayibum. These two ladies, Pater from Yibum and Chalitza completely, meaning they get to go free
You
completely.
get married to two sisters.
Yeah, since because right, he says, well, let's read inside what I've been quoting. Shenemar, like the pasuk says, "V'isha elachos l'sikach litzar," a person shouldn't take his wife and her sister because that'll be a tzara. Meaning to say, you can't marry two ladies who are both an erva, and even in Yibum we say that they don't fall to you. Bishash and nasu tzara zulazu. If they would theoretically speaking both be married to you, they'd become tzaros. Lo yehei l'chalikuchen. Afilu ba'achas mehen, there would be no zika even in one of them. That's the opinion of Reb Shimon. Okay. Haisa achas mehen. So this is the first case. Haisa achas mehen isser erva. Hasu lamali. What are we really learning here already? This is going to be like the fourth time we've learned the Mishnah that basically tells me that when I have two ladies falling who are sisters, but one of them is an erva, well, that means now I can do yibum with the other one. What's the chiddush? It's obvious. I mean, it was yesterday's Gemara. We went through like 4 examples, and plus we've already seen it 3 or 4 times. Hainu hach. This is literally the case of the earlier cases. Says the Gemara. No. This is unique. Why? Because this is according to Reb Shimon. The Reb Shimon Itzrich. I might have thought that maybe in Reb Shimon this halacha is not true. Why? Salkadai techamina. I would think. Reb Shimon. Since this is opinion, this is the opinion over here. Reb Shimon. He holds that in a normal case, Rachel and Leah are completely pater from Yibum and Chalitza. So I might think that since this case and this case looks eerily familiar, they look very, very similar, and I might think that just like over here, they're completely Petura. Therefore, what are they? They're Erevas, right? When my wife's brother doesn't have a mitzvah of Yibum, she's my wife's brother. That's an Ereva. That's listed in Akremos. So sex with any one of these women over here is a major problem. So I might think that if we allow you to do Yibum with Rachel here, which you should be allowed to, because again, Leah is an Erva, So therefore, there's no problem here of two sisters falling. She doesn't fall for her own reason. So you might think that if I could do even with her, which I have a mitzvah to do, I could even do even with one of them. And that's a problem. That's an issa deraisa of kares. Because remember, there's no mitzvahs ibam here. Because of litzvah telling me that they go free, that what are they? They're eishes ach shalei b'mokam mitzvah. So sakadat ibn hoyel Reb Shimon shtei achiyos loy choltzos lo misyabois ligzer mishum beis achiyos da alma. We'll make a gzeira here. Sorry.
From there to there.
Make exer from here to here. So Gemara says, Kamash Malon, that we don't do that. That rather, since over here people understand that it's an erva, they're not going to come to do yibum, and people are going to know that Leah is a separate erva. She's whatever she is. She's bita. So that's the reason why Rachel was okay. But in Chanami, in this case over here, it's going to be us. But over here, it's going to be
there's two
mutter.
sisters here with no erva. So
Correct,
they both
correct.
fall. I
Exactly.
understand.
So in the Iker Hadid, in the primary understanding of the halacha, there's a clear distinction. The Gemara was suggesting that if I wouldn't have had this Mishnah, maybe Rav Shimon would say that even in this case over here, although the halacha in Rachel would be you could do Yibam, he might say maybe you need to do Chalitza. Why? Because we wouldn't want people seeing Levi marry Rachel. Because if people would see Levi marrying Rachel, they would say, oh, it must be when two brothers are married to two sisters, and one of them, and they both die, that you could do Yibam with
One, not the
and
other.
according to Reb Shimon, you absolutely cannot because it's an erva. And so therefore, Gemara says, Kamashmalan, we're not concerned. Okay, what was the next halacha? Isser mitzvah. So this was taking erva away now, and we're going to call this chalitza. We're going to call this Isser mitzvah. Right? Meaning the Leah-Levi relationship. So what did it say in the Mishnah? It said in the Mishnah that the halacha is that choltzos v'lo misyamos, that everyone needs chalitza. Ask the Gemara. V'ha Shimon shtei achiyos loy choltzos v'loy misyamos. I don't understand something. In this case over here, Rachel and Leah are completely pater, right? Meaning and on a Torah level, this is the same. This is only midrabanan. But min Torah, this is exactly the same case. And if over here you're telling me that there's no yibum and no chalitza, they get to go free. So then why over here do you even need a chalitza for Rachel? Remember saying before, you really shouldn't need it. There's no zika bechlal here. There's no zika bechlal here. What's going on here? Just because Levi and Leah have an Issa Derabanan relationship, I'm now going to enforce a chalitza on these ladies? Why would I do that? It makes no sense, says the Gemara. Gzeira, you're right, it's a gzeira. Meaning gzeira to do a chalitza that is worthless. It doesn't do anything, but we want you to do the act of chalitza. Mishum Isser Mitzvah da Alma. Meaning, what's the normal case of an Isser Mitzvah? Normal case of an Isser Mitzvah would be, what would be the normal case of an Isser Mitzvah? Would not be Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Let's say you have Reuven and you have Shimon, and you have, let's say Shimon's married to Rachel, and let's say this is a Shnia relationship. So this is a Shnia, let's say, right? So what happens when Shimon dies? Now Rachel falls to Reuven. The halacha is, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to do not Yibam because it's an Issa Derabanan, but you do need a chalitza. So we might think that whenever someone's married to a Shnia, right, that the halacha is, let me just make sure I have this right. Yeah. You might think that the halacha is that if Shimon dies here and Rachel falls to Reuven, you might think that if I allow Leah to have no chalitza, right, I might think that even Rachel can get away without a chalitza, because really, what you see now on the screen is the same exact. That looks very similar. Levi's brother Shimon had a wife named Leah who was a Isser mitzvah shnia to Levi, and we're saying over here, according to the Gemara's suggestion, she gets to go free because she's completely put to this no zika. That looks eerily similar to this. And so since over here the halacha is it does require a chalitza, we're nervous that if we don't require chalitza here, you may forget to do chalitza here. And this woman is an Isser Yevama L'Shuk. So says the Gemara, Gzeira Mishum Isser Mitzvah Da'alma. Wonderful. So Gemara says the Gemara, that explains Leah. Leah's the same one over here. Let's just make this woman's name Leah to make life simple. Yeah? Leah, in another scenario here, she has a chi of chalitza. So this one makes sense to make a gzeira because this is the woman that you'll mistake for that woman. But why does Rachel need chalitza? Rachel has no zika. This case is exact on a Torah level. This is exactly the same. The Torah does not speak to Rachel. According to on a Torah level, Rachel has absolutely no zika, requires no yibum or no chalitza. Said in the Mishnah, Choltzos v'lo misyamus. The Gemara says, Hateinach ihi achosa ma'ika lemeimar. How are you going to explain why Rachel needs a chalitza? Gemara says, Gezeira, this is also a Gezeira. What's the Gezeira? Gezeira achosa mishum lasadida. So Rachel is a Gezeira because of Leah, who herself is only a Gezeira because of this Leah. Right? This normal case of a shnia, where you do need chalitza, me'ikar hadin. Why? Because on a Torah level, there's a zika, and you can't do yibum, but you got to do chalitza, and we don't want this woman to ever go free without a chalitza. So this woman, who me'ikar hadin does not require anything, we gave her a chalitza, because that's similar. Well, once this woman has a chalitza, how strange would it be if she gets a chalitza from Shimon's house, but Shimon's brother Reuven's wife, who is really no different than Leah, they're just sisters. Why does one sister get a chalitza and the other one doesn't? You might think the reason is because it must be, I don't have to give chalitza, or maybe they just did that for some other reason. You might then therefore think that even she doesn't require a chalitza, which will then lead to you thinking she doesn't require a chalitza. So a little bit of a derabanan on a derabanan, but if you remember when we learned the sugya of shnias to begin with, the whole discussion of shnias was itself a very unique halacha in that we were piling derabanans on top of derabanans. Says the Gemara, this is a wonderful cheshbon. This is very, very nice. But what would be the case if this was not a mitzvah? What it would be if this was an erva, right? The case we mentioned before. In the case of erva of our Mishnah, what did Reb Shimon say? Reb Shimon said, you do nothing with Leah because she doesn't fall, and you can even do yibum here with Rachel, right? And when we explained, the reason was because since Leah is an erva, the Levi, she doesn't fall, you no longer have the problem of sisters falling.
Right.
It's just like Rachel on her own, in which case Rachel has a din yibum. So says the Gemara, let me read it inside. V'ha gabi erva loy gazrinan. We don't make a gzeira. Let me just make sure I have this right. And the reason why we don't make a gzeira, why don't we require a chalitza from Leah? Now, why would we require a chalitza from Leah in this situation?
Why would we?
I'll tell you why in a second. Because the same way we're requiring in the case where it was a Isser Mitzvah, a chalitza from Rachel, even though she had no zika. Why? Because we want to make sure that Leah, who is similar to this Leah, gets a chalitza. Well, in this scenario over here, right, where she's an erva, so she has zero zika.
Yep.
But we're saying she does, right? So that means you can even do yibum with her, which also means if you decided not to do yibum, let's say you decided to do chalitza, right? Or let's say this way, let's say you did nothing. Can Rachel go marry someone? Of course not. You have to do yibum or chalitza with her. So why don't we say that just like she needs a chalitza or a yibum, so then midrabanan she shouldn't need one. What's your argument? She has no zika?
It's an erva.
Doesn't matter. She has no zika. Just like Rachel in this case had no zika, right? Remember, she's also an erva.
Right.
Remember, according to Reb Shimon, two sisters falling, they're both ervas, right? So just like she's an erva, so too here, Leah's an erva. What's Leah's?
Second case is different because
Yes.
it's only because of the result of being.
Yevamos, that's Gemara's answer. Gemara's going to say, you're right, they're both ervas, but I want to make sure everyone's following, yeah? So Leah is an erva. Why? She's a daughter.
Right.
Everyone knows that's his daughter.
Right.
No one's going to think that, Rachel gets a chalitza. What? Leah doesn't. Yeah, Leah's his daughter. No one's concerned about it. Here, it's a manufactured erva. No one's going to say, you're not going to really be able to understand. Like most people are going to, even in Reb Shimon's city, Reb Shimon Paskin, okay, Rachel and Leah are Pturim and Yevim. It's another step for me to explain, that's an Isser Erva, because, by the way, that's an Eishes Ach that doesn't have a mitzvah. It's not like an obvious one.
Right.
They're brothers' wives. Brothers' wives have a mitzvah yibum. What's the big deal? So therefore, in the case of here, I might think that if this is not an erva, but rather this is an Isser, let's say shnia or a mitzvah, whatever, so then I might think, so now all of a sudden, it's only an Isser D'Rabbanan. I have a wife of a brother and a wife of a brother, who we know Me'ikar Adin require nothing, but if you go that she needs a chalitza, and because of that she needs a chalitza, that makes sense. Why? Because really, what's the difference between these two ladies? The fact that there's a shnia, my grandmother's sister's wife's brother, who cares? Meaning, on a basic level, there's no difference between Rachel and Leah. And therefore, one can make a mistake to think that if she needs a chalitza and she doesn't, I might think, maybe she doesn't need a chalitza either, in which case then this is going to be a problem. So it makes sense to make the gzeira. Whereas over here, when you're talking about an erva, so an erva, which means Leah is now like his daughter, So no one's going to look at the situation and say, well, if I don't require a chalitza from Leah, I'll allow Rachel to go free. The reason why no one has to give a chalitza to Leah is because you don't give chalitza to your daughter. Everyone knows that.
The only reason why you would give chalitza or you give them to Rachel is because
Exactly. Right. It's even worse.
worse.
Right. Meaning it's specifically the only
Yeah,
reason why there
because
is
of that.
even a Zika here is because
Right.
she's not shaykh to the parsha. A very good point. And so therefore, let's read it inside. So it says the Gemara. So you're telling me by Isser Mitzvah you made a gzeira of Rachel, atu Leah. Right? Why? So why is Rachel getting a chalitza? Because she's married to a brother. Leah's married to a brother, and she needs a chalitza because of her, and she doesn't, but we'll give her one anyways because of her. Why not do the same thing by Erva and require, in the case of Erva, that Leah needs a chalitza? Says the Gemara, Ma'ikal Meimar, Gzeira Achos, sorry, V'hagabi Erva Legazrina, Shani Erva, the Migmer Gmirila Inchi. Everyone knows about Erva. The Kala Isla, everyone's going to know that the reason why Leah didn't get a chalitza was because she's a daughter. She's a mother-in-law. She's one of these 15 listed in the Mishnah, so that's why she didn't get it. But Ein Chanami, in a case of Shniyos, most people don't know the halachas of Shniyos. Let's be honest. Before we got to the sugya, I'm pretty sure everyone over here was like, what? What's a Shniya? What does it even mean? How does it work? It's not a well-known halacha. So my mother's aunt, who knew that was an issue? Like, you remember how confusing it was to make a distinction between this aunt or that aunt. So Shniyos are not something that people know, and therefore I need to make a gzeira of Leah, of Rachel, atu Leah. Okay.
The bottom one is a problem because they're Zukaka sisters.
According to Reb Shimon, Reb Shimon holds that if you have two sisters, and really any two ervas, meaning two women they're not ervas to him,
each other.
but by virtue of them being sisters, by virtue of them being sisters, when they fall, two people falling to Levi are now. Imagine if Levi were here. This is the best way to say it. The way Rav Shimon's halacha is explained is, if Levi would theoretically speaking do yibum to both, because they both have a separate chi of yibum, it's two different houses, what would happen? He'd be married to sisters, and you can't be married to sisters. So Rav Shimon says, because that's the case, it's like they don't fall at all. Does that make sense?
Okay, so that's
No.
what I said before.
Yeah. There's no. In fact, the way Reb Shimon would say it is because these women are sisters, there's no Zika. Zika means Hashem says do yibum with these ladies. So theoretically speaking, let's say, for instance, if let's say Rachel died, right, and now Shimon died, well, yeah, of course it's a mitzvah yibum with Leah. It's his brother's wife. It's only that since they both died, leaving two wives who just so happen to be sisters, independently, they're both going to be chayav and yibum. But it's the fact that they're happening now together and they're sisters, and Levi can't be with them. So Reb Shimon holds, so then what are they? They're my brother's wife without a mitzvah. That's an erva. Okay, new Mishnah. And let's get used to this model of Shlosha Achin, Shnaim, Nesua, Shnei Achis, because that's going to be the way the next, I think, like 3 or 4 Mishnayos stuff. So now I'm gonna erase this. Moving right along. Says the Mishnah. You know what? I'm gonna draw it on the board. Keep life simple. Again, we have Reuven. And Shimon. Reuven married to Rachel. Shimon married to Leah. For some reason, I'm going to put Levi on this side here. So they're all brothers. They're married to two wives. Let's read it inside. Says the Gemara, Shlosha Achin, Reuven and Shimon, Shnaim Nesuim Shtei Achios. Right? Very nice. Sisters. The Ve'echad Mufne. And you have a third brother, Levi. Levi's a bachelor. He's a single guy, never been married. Meis Echad Mibali Achios. We'll say Reuven dies. So now Rachel falls in Yibum to Levi. But before that happens, he does Maimer. Va'asaba Mufne Maimer. So Levi did Maimer with Rachel. So which means, right now, just let's work it out step by step. Rachel, technically speaking, is Zekuka to Levi, still, because only Maimer only works midirabanan. On a Torah level, they have not done yibum yet. So technically speaking, Rachel is not his wife 100%. Only midirabanan is she his wife. Midiraisa, she's still Yevamos. We're working slowly. Maimer is only midirabanan. On a Torah level, this doesn't exist. On a Torah level, she's just a regular Yevamos. Theoretically speaking, if let's say Shimon had no wife, theoretically speaking, this would just be a case where someone did Maimer, but Shimon, if he wanted to, he could do even with Rachel. He shouldn't, because he already did Maimer. But that's only midirabanan. On a Torah level, it's a woman who's falling to two brothers. Either one of the brothers could do Yibum, right? So, but it's just that since Shimon is married to Leah, who is Rachel's sister, so he wouldn't have a Yibum with Rachel, because that's an Erva relationship. Right. Okay. So Levi is the only one who could do it. He went ahead and jumped the gun and did Maimer, which is exactly what he's supposed to do. Young guy, single guy, wants to get married. Okay, no, my brother's wife died. I mean, Maimer is a mitzvah, yeah. I mean, it's not a mitzvah min Torah, but it was instituted. Maimer was instituted to create an appropriate relationship between the Yavam and the Yevama, that he shouldn't just go sleep with his sister.
He could sleep.
Of course, that's min Torah, yeah. Technically, yeah. So says the Gemara, "V'asa b'mufna Maimer, v'achar kach meis achav v'sheni." So now Shimon died. So now Reuven and Shimon die, and Levi has two ladies falling to him, Leah and Rachel. Now, they're sisters, right? So now, on a Torah level, this one is what? Achos kukaso. This is a zika here. Again, we're not in Reb Shimon. We're going back to the regular sheet of the Chachamim. Let's get the Reb Shimon model out of our heads. We're back to the normal case of the way we understand it, which is that Rachel and Leah are sisters, but they're falling from two separate houses. There's a separate zika here and a separate zika here. Well, normally, what did we say? Let's forget the Maimer. The halacha is cholzos v'lo misyabma. So you do chalitza to both. Can't do yibum because midirabanan. Each one is achos kukasei. We have a wrinkle here. Levi did Maimer to one of them. So what does Maimer do? Maimer makes her his wife midirabanan. So she's problematic on a right, because she's a kuka to him. So she's achos kukasei, but she's right. That's obvious. And she is achos, the sister of not only kukasei on the Torah level, but achos ishtay on the Rabbanon level. Because Maimer, achos ma'amaro is really just saying a fancy way of saying achos ishtay v'derabbanon. This is a rabbinic marriage, so she's the sister of his rabbinic wife. Simple. Yeah.
Didn't we say before you can't? You got two sisters falling down to the one guy. Now they're both.
I just said. So let's forget Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon was a unique opinion. It's one of the dangers sometimes of learning a das yachid, an individual opinion is that they throw you for a loop because they change everything you understand about the discussion. But yes, we're going now in the regular sheet of the Chachamim that Rachel and Leah fall, and midirabanan, each one of them is the sister of my skuka, achos kukasa, relative of my skuka, and that's midirabanan aser. So therefore, Levi. So says the Mishnah. So machlekes b'sham b'sal. And I'm waiting for your quote. Who cares what Beis Shammai says? We're going to see Beis Shammai a lot today. Beis Shammai says, what's the halach in such a case? Ishtay imay v'halzu teitze mishum achos isha. Beis Shammai says, interestingly, this Maimer, we saw this sheet of Beis Shammai earlier. Beis Shammai holds that Maimer is very strong. Just keep it like that. He holds Maimer is kiknusa. It literally is like you've done yibum. The only thing that's missing is the consummation of it. Really, she's 100% min haTorah, your wife. So if that's the case, it's like Nisun without the bia.
Right.
So according to Beis Shammai, well, it makes sense then to say that what's Levi supposed to do now, right?
Yibum.
So all he's got to do is consummate. And Leah is what?
Ever.
Leah is going to be no mitzvah because this would be like achos ishtay. It's like he's literally already married. And this woman now would be his wife's sister.
Therefore, you don't
So
need to
therefore
do
he
anything.
says,
Nothing.
stay with the Yibum with Rachel, and everything is good.
Yeah.
Stays with Rachel. Did the Maimer? That's Beis Shammai's opinion. Beis Hillel,
Yeah.
what does Beis Hillel say? Beis Hillel is going to say no. Maimer is like we said before. Maimer is a din derabbanan. On a Torah level, you still have a zika here and you still have a zika here.
Oh.
It's like it doesn't exist on a Torah level. So what's the halacha? Both of them are also because of achos kukaso.
Right.
Leah is a separate problem because she's achos isha midirabanan. But on a Torah level, there's a zika to both of them. So of course the halacha is going to be. Let's read it inside. Beis Hillel Aimrim moitzias ishto beget. Very interesting shita. He says moitzias ishto beget. Rachel, who is your D'Rabbanan wife, you can't consummate the marriage. You've already done Maimer, but you can't finish it off
Because now
because she's the sister of your Zika.
Right.
So because of Achas Kukoso, you can't stay with Rachel, and because of Achos Ishto, you can't stay with Leah. You can't do Yibum with Leah because she's the sister of your Maimer, and you can't do Yibum with Rachel. You can't finish it off because she's the sister of your Zika. So it says Beis Hillel, both got to go. You do so. So what does each one need? Leah needs chalitza.
Yeah.
Chalitza for Leah, and Rachel needs two things. Rachel needs on a Torah level a chalitza, and on a D'Rabbanan level she needs a get. So she gets get and chalitza for Rachel.
This is only when Rachel fell first, right? Right. Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna disregard the order here only
Okay.
because it's a machlekes tanaim.
Right.
Exactly, I think it'll just
Shimon
complicate
would say you need nothing now, wouldn't he?
the older Shimon. Yeah,
Yeah.
Rav Shimon would say if the order
It
different
doesn't
or not.
matter,
Rav Shimon for sure would say that there's that
Yeah,
they're
nothing.
pseudo, they go free.
Correct.
Yeah,
right.
that's nothing to talk about.
Got it.
Yeah. And then the other question is also a good question. According to the opinion,
Yeah.
Rav and Rabbi Yochanan had a machlokes about which order matters.
Got it.
We're gonna leave that off. Yeah,
I
it's
got
just
it.
gonna complicate
Yeah,
it unnecessarily.
Understood.
For myself too, also. I'm not saying I
Yeah,
understand.
I understand.
Okay. So it says the Gemara. Beis Hillel oimrim moitzi es ishte beget ubechalitza ve'eshes achiv bechalitza. Right. Leah is now effectively his brother's wife. Right. It's very simple. She gets a chalitza, and she gets a chalitza and a get. And says the Mishnah, Zu hi sha'amru. This case is the case where they said the following line, which is very much later in the Masechta. Oy loy al ishtai ve'oy loy al eshes achiv. Oy loy al ishtai, the one he did Maimer with, we're calling ishtai, and oy loy la eshes achiv, and Leah is the brother's wife. Why? Because he can't marry her and he can't marry her. Meaning, this is a case where even though on a Torah level you got two ladies falling to him in Yibum, and by the way, the Rishonim explained this is why the case was set up with Levi having no wife. I called him a bachelor before. I mean, in this case could have just as well been said with Levi having his own wife, Dinah, who's unrelated. It's not having a wife doesn't have a wife doesn't change anything. You still got to do all this. It's just that in order to put this last line in the only his last line in the Mishnah of wanting to say when Levi's stuck here without a wife, this is the case of Levi stuck without a wife. When you have a bachelor who two of his brother's wives are falling who are sisters, in such a situation, if he did Maimer with one, again, and he did nothing wrong. Remember, Reuven died first in this case, right? So when Reuven died, he did Maimer with Rachel. He was supposed to do it. In fact, when he did Maimer, he was anticipating doing Ibum. He had a mitzvah Ibum. When Shimon was still alive, right? When Shimon,
that's why I asked you, right? Then it's fine, right?
Right. When Shimon was alive,
it's all good.
Rachel was a Yevama. He's supposed to do Yibum. He did Maimer. He's Rabbi, what should I do? My brother's wife just died. Okay, you got to go do Maimer. He went and did Maimer. Did exactly what he's supposed to do. And then he's making arrangements for the night, the special night. He's going to do Yibum with her. And then that morning, punk, he gets a message. What's that message from?
Shimon died.
Shimon died. Now his sister, his wife's sister, his D'Rabbanan wife's sister is now falling to him in Yibum. She just jacked everything up. Not only is she going to need a chalitza, she just ruined it for him with Rachel. Because now he can't do Yibum with her anymore because she is the wife of his skuka. So that's the shita.
Bad advice,
No, it's not halacha. It's
should have just said close the deal, and that we don't have this problem at all, right?
Yeah, you're right. That's true. It's a good point. Okay, so says the Gemara. With me, Rabbi?
Who was you?
Okay. Zu hi lemute mai. This last case we just said is this case of Levi being not able to be with Rachel and not able to be with Leah. I'll say it in English as something like he's left with nobody. When the Mishnah says, Zuhi Sha'amru, this is the case where we say, this is the case where we say that the Yavam can't be with anybody. This is the case. It says the Gemara, usually when you say a phrase in the Mishnah, Zuhi, this is, the implication is that there might be another version of where someone isn't allowed to be with someone that we don't paskin like. What's that case? Zuhi lemute mai, lemute hachte Rabbi Yehoshua. It's coming to exclude the case of Rabbi Yehoshua. What's the case of Rabbi Yehoshua? The Gemara later on, far later on. I think it's on like
109A.
Thank you very much. I was about to say Kuf Test.
Quick test.
We'll be there in like a month and a half. So not that far away. Yeah. So what's the case? What's the case there? We're going to put it up and then we'll take it down. The case is you have Reuven. No, it's really a simple
That would be
case.
2.5 months, so 65 days away.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, Reuven and Shimon. Let's say
Yeah.
Reuven is married to Rachel, like always, and
And
Shimon
Leah.
is married to Leah. Now, the only difference here is that instead of these being two adults, we're going to say that Leah is a katana.
So she didn't have Bia yet?
And-
She did?
Well, it's one thing. She's a katana, and she's a yisoma. What's a yisoma? She's an orphan.
She's an orphan.
Now, what's the halacha about katana yisoma? How did Leah, who was a 10-year-old, how did she get married to Shimon?
Right. Her
She has
father
no das
didn't
of her
know.
own, and her
Right,
father's not
right,
alive.
Right.
So the rabbis instituted something called.
You
Oh,
guys
hey.
are not available for 6:30 in the morning, perhaps, Minion, once in a while, 6:30, 6:35 to help us in the morning? Too early?
Try maybe next week.
Okay, if you're around, 6:30, 6:35.
Next week I'm going to be
In Israel.
Oh, okay,
Hi.
Hey, Kevin.
how are you? Thank you.
Okay. So Leah is 10 years old.
How'd she become instead?
How did she get married? So the rabbis instituted a rule that just like a father can marry his 10-year-old daughter off Minat Torah, with the Rabbanon, his mother and her older brother could also marry him off. Look at this.
Okay.
This is the classic example of what's called miyun. Miyun means that if she wanted to, up until 12 years old, because she could leave. Now she can't leave if her father married her off. If her father married her off, they're married. But with the Rabbanon, we gave the mother and the brother, mom and the brother, we'll call it the brother, or the mom,
Yeah.
we'll do the mom. The mom married her off to Shimon. Okay, so that's what Leah is,
She's a man.
right? She could. So now she's 10 years old. Reuven and Shimon,
There's
Sunday
no erva with Reuben.
the only error that exists here is that they're sisters.
Sisters, got it. And Rachel is an
She's
adult.
a gadola. She's a regular, normal woman.
Got it.
What age me? Could you tell? 10 tonight? No.
I don't know how young she has to be, but once she hits 12, she's got to make a decision by 12. If she doesn't make a decision by 12, she's married. Not over.
Mama's a Kadana.
Yeah. So there's going to be three opinions of what to do in the following case. What happens if Reuven dies? So now, what is Shimon supposed to do now? Yeah. Reuven dies. Now Rachel falls to Shimon. Now, on a Torah level, Shimon's not married
At all.
because it's only with the Rabbanon. So on a Torah level, Shimon is a bachelor. Rachel falls to him in a Torah. So there's a
One
Zika
second. He's allowed to have relations with her?
slowly.
The
Right?
girl, the Katana.
Yes.
He's allowed to have relations with her?
Yes.
So how could Rachel fall to him in relations?
Why not? They're not married in a Torah. They're only married with the
Even
Rabbanon.
though they have relations?
I think so, yeah.
Wow.
Now, it's a little bit of a funny thing, but
Wow.
so now, so
Like, because it's Isha Lachosa.
on a Rabbanon.
But he had relations with her.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't make her. She's not capable of being married by Torah until she's 12. This way,
Wow.
since she's only married with the Rabbanon, on a Torah level, he's not married, which means Rachel on a Torah level is kukator. So that means on a Torah level, Rachel is his Yevama. On a Rabbanon level, Rachel is his wife's sister. So on a Torah level, she needs a chalitza. On a Rabbanon level, he can't do even. So certainly Shimon can't do even with Rachel because Rabbanon. So now the question is what to do. What is Shimon supposed to do in this situation, right? Because not only can he not do yibum with Rachel, now l'chora he's also to be with his own wife.
After Khalitza?
No. The second Reuben died. Because
Because
now his wife, now his Rachel, his Yevama, who he has a Zika relationship to, whose wife is Achos Kukasa.
Wow.
Follow that? On a Torah level,
But how could she fall then?
because on a Torah level, he's not married to Leah.
I'm
On a Torah level, he's not married to Leah. So Rachel falls to him. There's a Zika relationship.
Wow.
So
because on
it's
Torah level is nothing
It's
everywhere.
nothing.
Oh,
It's
so
nothing.
It's nothing.
right. So that means on a Torah level, Rachel is his Yivama. So he's got to do Yibam with her. Can't do Yibam with her. Why? Because she is the sister of his wife on a Derabanan level. Can't finish off. He can't continue to be married to her because she's the sister of his Yivama, Zika. So this is very similar to this sort of bind that Beis Hillel created here. What did Beis Hillel say? A very similar case. Reuben and Shimon die, and Levi, who had done Maimer with Rachel, Can't be with Leah because she's the sister of Maimer. Can't be with Rachel because the sister of Skuka. So Beis Hillel said, Zuhisha Amru, that Levi screwed. But that's basically what the Mishnah said. So Gemara says, Zuhi, this is the case? Are you saying in this case not, that you're implying in this case not? That must mean you're choosing like one of the sides of the opinions here. What are the three opinions? There's the opinion of Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Yoshua, says the Gemara, Rabbi Yoshua. You must be saying we don't do like Rabbi Yoshua. What does Rabbi Yoshua say? Rabbi Yoshua says, you give a get to Leah. Yeah, we'll say Rabbi Yoshua. He says Leah gets
Shimon gives a get to Leah.
a get, and she's gone because he
Well,
can't, because she is the sister of my skuka.
Hey, she's not Gedana.
And Rachel, of course, gets chalitza because you can't do even with her because she is the sister of my wife, and therefore, what do you say?
Even if you're not married anymore, because right when we learn that,
Yeah, it
the
doesn't make a difference.
the whole time.
Once
Sister-in-law is always no good forever.
No,
no, she is.
no, he wouldn't be allowed to marry Rachel for a separate reason now, because this is his brother's wife now that there's no more mitzvah. Meaning that would be a separate problem. Meaning besides it being his wife's sister, it's also his brother's wife. So therefore, that erva goes forever.
Yeah, but Reuben's dead.
Doesn't matter. Reuven dying, you know.
Doesn't she? But they fall. She falls in Yibam. What do you mean?
When Rachel fell to Shimon,
Yes.
Yibam, right?
Yes. I mean,
Says
Rabbanan was
Yeshua, you got to do
right.
chalitza. Once
Right.
you got to do chalitza, well, what is she now? She's just. She might not be an erva. It could be that would be considered kibun shalabana shuv layivna. But basically the point is he can't be with Rachel and he can't be with Leah. Now, so says Rabbi Yeshua, this is the case where the yavam is not going to have anyone. So says the Gemara, by you telling me that this case of Beis Hillel is the only case where that happens, obviously are telling me we don't hold like Rabbi Yeshua. Must be we hold like one of the other opinions. Is the opinion of Rabbi Gamliel. It's good to have this information. What does Rabbi Gamliel say to do in the case? He says, just wait Leah out. You're right. Right now you're stuck. But if you wait 2 years, Leah's going to become a Gedola. And then one of two things are going to happen. She's either going to do miyun and say, I don't want to be married to you. And we remember if we said miyun works retroactively. It means it's like they were never married. So that means it's like they were never married. Well, now you can do even with Rachel. So Rabbi Gamliel says, wait.
The Rachel's stuck in no man's land.
For the duration of Leah becoming a Gedola.
Yeah.
Well, then she wants to stay on.
What? And if she wants to stay around, well, now that she's married min haTorah. If she's married min haTorah, that mafkia the zika.
Very good.
If the whole problem here is that she's in between. But if you just wait 2 years or however long it takes for her to become a Gedola, the situation will become clarified of its own.
But why can't he marry Rachel? You can't marry two sisters.
No, it's sister.
You're not allowed to be in general.
No,
you're
you
not
can't.
allowed to be. Got it.
Because once you're married to one, the other one is your wife's sister.
I understand.
Yeah.
Got it.
So if Leah, when she becomes 12, says, sorry, Shimon, I'm out, then it's like they were never married, in which case Shimon could do even with Rachel. And if she says, I love Shimon, he's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me, well, now they're married min haTorah. Well, they're married min haTorah, but what would have happened if she was not a katana? What would have happened if Shimon was married to Leah and Reuven dies? Rachel goes free. So it says, we're going to wait. It's going to solve itself. Either she does miyun, and then you could do even with Rachel, and he gets a wife, or she doesn't do miyun, sticks around, in which case then Rachel is putter. So either way, he'll have a wife. Either it'll be Leah or Rachel, but it'll be good. That's the shita of Rabbi Gamliel. And the shita of, who's the other one? Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Lazar says you don't wait. He says a different svara. Just sometimes it's good just to see the godless of the way they think. I heard a beautiful idea very quickly. It was one of these question and answer tapes from Rav David Gottlieb from Or Samech, and they were asking one of the Rabbanim in the shul in the yeshiva was asking, I have a Talmud. He was asking me, Rabbi, why do I need to learn how to learn? There's so many art scrolls out there. I don't need to learn how to learn. I just read it in the art scroll. I know the information. So he had a long answer, but one idea that he said is that learning how to learn, and again, if you need the art scroll to help, there's nothing wrong with it. I use the art scroll too when I'm stuck, but learning how to learn does something else. It's not just about knowledge of what's in the words. Learning how to learn is learning how to think. And that's really what you're doing. I mean, how many times are you going to run into a Yevamos case? Never. I'm pretty confident. I mean, I'll go out on a limb. No one's going to be posting any shilos from Yevamos in this of us over here, right? So why are we learning this? What's the point?
You mind?
Nah, honestly, it's so uncommon, even for big rabbanim. Nah, But I'm saying, but even for poskim, we're sitting on a best, and cases for Yevamos come across so infrequently that. So the Torah says, what are we doing? We're spending time forcing our brains down a road that it doesn't want to go, like a cat that you're dragging, to create a pathway in our brain to think as close as we can think like Hashem wants us to think. That's all it is. It's just, so he says, that's what you're doing. So he says, sometimes it's even.
I don't like to think.
Well, but
I'm not used to thinking. I work. I
Yevamos is not for you.
I have a certain methods. Yeah.
So what's Rebbe Elazar's opinion?
My brain was hurting early on. Really. Brain.
Meaning, I think I'm pretty confident. I'm pretty confident if we were sitting and talking about this, and I told you, no daf, solve the problem. I mean, if I hadn't told you, Rebbe Gamliel, I'm pretty confident we would have been able to, talking about it enough, thinking about it enough, like in a boardroom, solving the problem, we would have said, wait. Why not just wait? Well, that's what happened. What they were doing is they didn't open up an art scroll or open up a Shiur and listen to a Daf Yomi Shiur and say, nothing wrong with that, by the way. I'm a huge fan. They sat and thought. One second. What's the problem here? What's Shimon supposed to do? You can't do that. He said, what do you mean? Just wait.
The geniuses.
Right? It's just, if you stop and think about it. Okay, so he says wait. And like we explained, it's a very, I don't know, I just found it to be very intellectually very satisfying that his answer was a simple thing, not some complicated. It was just hold your horses, sit on a chair, wait her out. The situation will resolve itself.
Is the next stop easy?
Yeah, well, I'd say
because we say already 8:30.
Can I just say one thing? 3 seconds, along with what you were saying, right? And I'm not minimizing. They were a much higher level than we could ever be, right?
Just know, I don't know where I heard this, but whenever someone says the word "but," you disregard everything they said before that.
Right,
so feel free to say whatever you need to say.
Correct.
Delete it with the "but" and then tell me what you have to say.
Today, they didn't have 2 phones here. They didn't have 4 jobs when you get home. They didn't have the distractions that we have.
They Romans running
5 cars,
running
So if I understand your comments, if I'm just filling in the gaps, what you're saying is that what they accomplished was unbelievable, but they didn't have the nisyonos and the challenges that we have. Is that more or less what you're saying?
No,
I'm okay with you saying that.
Romans running around the city.
There's a famous story.
They didn't have a television. They didn't have Netflix. When they went, finished whatever they did. All they had 2 things: to be with the wife and children, or if she or learn.
What about Vanessa?
When Parnassa was done, that's it.
First of all, you're not 100%. I don't completely disagree with you. I think what you're saying is a little bit off, but I'm saying I think there's a lot to what you're saying. I'll tell you why.
We're getting an airplane to Florida.
There's a special type of nisayon that comes with prosperity that people who don't have prosperity don't know from. Like, it's like, to me, the same thing that people who win the lottery run into. It's like they don't know what to do. It's like a challenge. Look, what are you supposed to do with all this money? It's like, what do you mean? People are davening. They're playing the lottery like as if it's going to help them. If you hand a person who doesn't have a clue how to value $1 million, it's gone, right? Are you willing to sit a little bit? I'll go a little weiter over here. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So
What are you getting to?
I don't know. I'm going to finish it.
Mishnah?
Yeah, do that.
You're getting to Mishnah.
I'm going to get to that.
I'm going to get to Mishnah.
Okay. Colin, you going to sit with me for a little bit now?
Yeah, I'll stay.
8 o'clock, I got it.
7-10 minutes from the Arab, and I'll go to 8 o'clock.
Actually, no, my daughter's going to.
They asked if you can do Zoom.
Oh, yeah.
Tonight. They wanted to do Zoom.
I had my son didn't. We're talking about
You too.
He took the other keys,
Yeah.
and I had to
Are
take the
you
car.
giving it to Shiur tonight?
Yeah.
I had to take the road. And my daughter's going to start blowing up my phone, and it's like.
Okay.
I don't know what-
Go to the table back. Thank you.